Pry. Today is Friday, March 22nd, and we're joined by Shannon McEwen and Kirien Sprecher. I'm Ken K-Train Kreitz. All aboard. Today's format, as usual, news, waiver wire, DFS, and then end with some silliness. I'll start, gentlemen, with some news I know Kirian's happy with. Giannis returns for the Bucks. Put up a 21-9-5 game last night in a win over the woeful Nets. The hamstring issue caused him to miss 2 straight and 3 of the last 8 games for the Bucks. Milwaukee is 10.5 games of Boston in second and 1.5 games ahead of Cleveland for that second place. Kirien, how did Giannis look last night?
He looked good. 9 of 19 from the field isn't your typical Giannis field goal percentage, but he played 35 minutes. I'm pretty content with him moving forward, that he'll be healthy and strong. The Bucks fell apart a little bit in the second half, kind of blew a lead and made it a close game. The final score closer than the actual game was for the whole game actually was. But he looked fine, and I'm confident with him rolling forward. The back-to-backs he might sit out. Chris Middleton was also out of this game, but he had been playing pretty well after a long injury absence too.
Shannon, I would think the Bucks are motivated to keep that second place in case they face Cavs in round 2, right?
Yeah, you want to delay the matchup against Boston for as long as possible and hope someone else gets lucky and knocks out the mighty Celtics. So absolutely, you'd have to assume the Bucks are going to push as hard as possible for the number 2 seed, while also, making sure Giannis and Dame and Middleton in particular are healthy. But the 35 minutes, team high 35, or I'm sorry, Damian played 37 minutes and Giannis 35. That's the most encouraging aspect of that game for me.
There we go. Now, Shannon, take us to some womp news out of NBA headquarters.
Yeah, the G League Ignite is set to fold at the end of the season. Commish Adam Silver suggested at the All-Star game that this might happen. NIL deals at the college level have made the team unnecessary. Money talks. We've got former Ignite players in the NBA include Scoot Henderson, Jonathan Kuminga, Jalen Green, and Dyson Daniels, all solid players who I would love if any one of them landed on the Pistons. This year's Ignite team includes projected first rounders. Oh, no. Why are you guys doing this to me? I'm going to go with Ron Holland is one of the 2 projected first rounders.
Kirien, can you help us with that pronunciation?
I cannot.
I'm going to go Montes Bizelis.
Matas.
But
Matas.
I thought you said you can't help us, and then you correct me. Come on, that's you were supposed to jump in there. You're the young one. You're the one hardest working of the 3 of us.
I used to cover the G League Ignite, but that's off to our boy Michael Gillow now. So I haven't been following the Ignite too closely.
Yeah,
I did look up Vasily Micic, how to pronounce that earlier today.
As well you should. Until
an NBA announcer says it a couple 100,000 times, I won't know the name, unfortunately. The Ignite are, they don't believe in competition. They are 6-40 this season. 6-40. Thoughts, guys? How's this changed the NBA landscape?
I don't think they were particularly good at developing prospects, frankly. I think they coddled these guys. I'd love to. Scoot Henderson off to an extremely slow start. Kuminga was off to a very slow start with the Warriors. I'd love to know the collective shooting percentage in the NBA of Ignite alumni. It's probably 39% or something. I just feel like they didn't get that great training down there.
Yeah, that institutional abuse that you get, attending college and playing for a college coach. There you go.
Exactly.
They're missing that.
But
yeah, I would take the opposite side of that. I feel like I'm a Wisconsin Badger fan. You're a Northwestern fan. These programs aren't pumping out NBA talent. You're going to get a lot better NBA training in the G League going up against those guys.
Watch your mouth, Kirien. Pat Spencer signed a 2-way deal with the Warriors. Played for NU a year after the transfer portal. World's greatest lacrosse player, by the way.
Johnny Davis might be the worst player in the NBA right now, and it makes me
DC
very,
friends,
very sad.
My DC friends curse that draft pick every day they wake up.
Yeah. Definitely the worst lottery pick who's in the NBA.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
so like I said, I covered the G League really closely the last couple of years, but not too much this year, just more of like an editorial role. But Leonard Miller is another guy that came up through there. It was drafted by the Timberwolves, and he was putting up double doubles against these NBA caliber guys. I think the issue with the G League Ignite is it was all like 19-year-olds and then like 38-year-olds that are trying to come in. It's just like that's a weird dynamic, and to be a fly on the wall during those practices and see these 38-year-olds like, I'm gonna make a comeback in the NBA. And it's like this dynamic is weird. I don't know. So I'm not surprised that it's being dissolved, but I do think the G League in general is a much better avenue, or playing in Europe is a much better avenue than most college campuses.
And Leonard Millard, good name drop. If you're in a deep dynasty league, you're able to stash G Leaguers. Leonard Millard's a good name to stash.
Well done. All right, Kirien, take us to some not great news out of New Orleans.
Yeah, so Brandon Ingram went down with an injury last night. The Twitter docs are calling it a hyperextension, but they haven't released anything official about what it is. Willie Green after the game said we're praying for him, which doesn't give me a lot of positivity surrounding that. It looked like he just kind of bumped knees, and then as he was falling off balance, his knee kind of twisted. This sucks for the Pelicans just in general. On a personal level, they were going off. Their defense was really good. Zion's been playing really well. So I don't know. They're probably just going to shut him down for the last couple of weeks of the regular season. Hope they can maintain this level of play. In terms of what does that mean for fantasy? Trey Murphy's probably already rostered in a lot of leagues, but he's going to get a huge bump. He's going to be chucking threes. And then, you got guys like Jordan Hawkins and Matt Ryan. They're sharpshooters that have had moments where they have had weeks where they go off and hit a bunch of threes in a week. But neither of them really got an opportunity last night. Instead, it was a lot of Najee Marshall and Robinson Earl, Jeremiah Robinson Earl. That might have just been a matchup thing because Orlando has a lot of size matching up with Paulo Banchero and Franz and Moritz and, all those guys, Wendell Carter. So that might have just been a matchup style thing. Hawkins and Ryan might get more minutes going forward if BI has to miss time. But yeah, the Ingram injury did not look good last night.
Yeah, Trey Murphy's going to end up being the big winner here. I would assume he slides into the starting lineup. He is a top 60 player on a per game basis over the past week with averages of 31.5 minutes, 16.3 points, 3 3-pointers, 5.8 rebounds. We've talked about Trey Murphy a ton on this podcast. We are in love with him. And as Kirien, KSK, pointed out in his professional diagnosis for the Pelicans, this sucks.
I've got BI. I got Brandon Ingram on 2 of my playoff teams, and that might just be the nail in the coffin for both those squads, unfortunately. All right, gentlemen, it's time for fan feedback. Some of our favorites are back online, asking solid questions. Let's go to Maluk, who wants to know Peyton Pritchard or Trey Mann. Says he picked up Pritchard for the back-to-back while Drew is out. Trey Mann's available on waivers. What say you for next week? I know Pritchard and the Celtics only have 3 games next week. Charlotte has 4.
Yeah, I'm probably rolling with Trey Mann just because of that 4-game week. I'm really high on Peyton Pritchard, though. The Celtics have essentially locked up the 1 seed. They're going to be resting a lot of these starters. We're already kind of seeing that starting to happen over the last couple of weeks. So I'm really high on Pritchard, but I've got to lean Mann with the 4-game week here.
Yeah, I would argue daily leagues, Pritchard still is the guy. We've already seen Drew Holiday's ruled out for Friday's game against Detroit. So Pritchard will get another start. As Kirien mentioned, I expect the Celtics to rest some of their regulars down the stretch. So there'll be off games for Derek White as well, Jaylen Brown. It's possible whenever one of those 3 sit that Pritchard, at the very least gets extra minutes, but will receive spot starts. So daily leagues, for the next 36 hours or 24 hours, Pritchard's the answer. Next week, if you're in a weekly pickup league with those 4 games, give me Trey Mann.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because the Celtics are playing your Detroit Pistons tonight. So
Who
that might be a major blowout, and Pritchard might be running around the court a lot.
Yes. Well, we will talk about Pritchard in 2 of our segments coming up.
All right, well, gentlemen, Christian Rogers teeing one up for Shannon here. Thoughts on Detroit small forward? I'm going to give this a shot, but Toussaint Evouamwan. Shannon, feel free to correct me there. Your thoughts on him for the silly season? Could he see monster minutes with all these injuries in Detroit?
It's entirely possible. And watching tonight's game, I think is going to be, is going to glean, there'll be plenty for us to glean from after tonight's game, because it's to be determined what the Pistons are going to do. There might be a player not currently on the roster who gets big minutes even. Maybe Quinn Grimes comes back, sees some time at the small forward spot. But you got Umude. Umudi's out. Fontecchio's already been ruled out for Friday. You got our boy Chemezi, Me Too, who was just recently signed. So the Me Too movement continues to live on. It's moved to Detroit. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Me Too sees some action and possibly a starting spot tonight for the Pistons. I mean, there's not a ton of options for Detroit. They might even go double big man, twin towers, and have Duren and Wiseman run minutes together. So I would, before making any action though, especially for like long-term rest of season ads, I would watch Friday's game against the Celtics and make a decision.
And then we got just a straight up betting question from Athens. Who do you think's winning tonight versus Pelicans or Heat? Miami's a 3-point favorite. It is in Miami, but Pelicans a little banged up. Obviously, might see a heavy dose of Murphy and Jones tonight.
You gotta wait for the injury report on this one. I think Bam is questionable.
Truly questionable, not Miami questionable, but actually.
Yeah, exactly. And Jimmy Butler, I think he just has played one game since missing a couple games, so he might take a day off. It's going to be interesting. Then we just talked about Brandon Ingram too. So he hasn't officially even been ruled out for tonight. Obviously, we're projecting him to be out because that injury did not look good, and it's the second night of a back-to-back. So I would wait for the injury report on this. My initial instinct is leaning Pelicans just based on how they've been playing recently. The Heat have been struggling to find the Heat way for 48 minutes while the Pelicans have been playing really well. And I know BI is a huge part of their success, but Zion is playing really well. CJ's playing really well. So I'm leaning Pelicans right now, but got to wait for the injury report.
Yeah, the Pelicans are 8-3 in 11 starts for Trey Murphy this season. One of those starts came against Miami, and that was on February 23rd. The Pelicans lost 95-106 in New Orleans. 32 minutes from Trey Murphy. That was actually absolutely his worst spot start for the Pelicans. I'm leaning Miami. If Bam plays, if Bam sits, give me the Pelicans.
And I'll say, hey, Alex, if you're listening, let's bump up that rest of the season forecast for Trey Murphy. I've been bugging him a month for that. Okay. One interesting question from Jock. He just says, hey, can y'all just get to the 8 players? Presumably meeting our waiver wire pickups. And you know what, Jock? No, we're going to slowly mention them one at a time with our logic, but it's time for that now. We are off to the waiver wire section. Kirien, would you waiver wire section. As usual, we got 2 regular picks each and 1 long shot, though I think Kirien's breaking the rules. Games next week. Most teams have 4 games next week, but there are 12 teams with 3 games. There are some nice pickups on those 12 teams, but they do only have 3 games. With that in mind, Kirien, take us to Golden State for your first pick.
All right, so I'm going with Trace Jackson Davis with my first pick, rostered in 44% of leagues on Yahoo. He's been an interesting guy all year, kind of going in and out of the rotation, but he has been firmly in the rotation over the last 2 weeks. Double figures in 6 straight starts, or 6 straight appearances, 6 straight games. He's made 2 starts during that time, 7 boards, 1.8 blocks in 25 minutes per game. He's playing with 2 Hall of Fame point guards that are setting him up for easy buckets, great efficiency there. Defensive production is the key to like maintaining this strong stretch for him being fantasy viable, because he's not going to be a 25-point scorer or a 20 rebound guy. He's just not getting enough minutes for that. So as long as he's blocking multiple shots per game, he's going to have a bunch of value. He's playing 4 games next week, so there's value in there too. I think he's just like a really solid play to get you, 12 points, 8 boards, and a couple blocks to fill in for a missing starter like, say, Brandon Ingram.
Okay, Trace Jackson Davis also with 4 games next week for the Warriors. I'm going to go to Portland for my first pick. Cover guy of this video, Delano Banton, backup guard. Portland with only 3 games next week, but check your playoff rules. I'm in 1 2-week playoff matchup on ESPN, for instance. Look, in Portland, Malcolm Brogdon done for the season. Frankly, don't know why they didn't trade him at the deadline. In the last 10 games, Banton, the former Celtic, is averaging almost 33 minutes a game. Over those last 10 games, over 17 points, almost 5 rebounds, almost 4 assists, 2.5 3-pointers, 1.4 stocks, a good free throw percentage, but a bad field goal percentage. Also, and I wonder about your opinion on this, Shannon, is Jeremy Grant done for the season in Portland? If so, a lot of shots for Banton. Grant has missed the last 5 games. He's doubtful for tonight. He's missed 8 of the last 10 games. What do you think, Shannon? Is Grant done?
It's certainly possible. Hamstring injuries are always tough. They always seem to last longer than you expect. If you tweak it, you can have a setback, which appears that's part of the deal with Grant. So it's certainly possible. The fact that they haven't came out. They're still basically listening and updating his injury status on a day-to-day basis is at least somewhat encouraging, but it would not surprise me if he ends up sitting the rest of the season. Anyway,
Grant out, a lot of shots for Delano Banton. And with that, Shannon, take us to your first free agent pickup.
Yeah, this guy has been one of the favorites of the podcast over the past couple months. G.G. Jackson, forward for the Memphis Grizzlies, 45% rostered on Yahoo. Over the past week, he's been a top 25 player on a per game basis. He's averaging 38 minutes per game, 25.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, 4.3 3-pointers, 52% from the floor, 88% from the free throw line, which is very encouraging over the past 3 games. Jackson, we've highlighted him in the past. Alex has ranted about his inefficiency from the floor. So I wouldn't believe that 52% mark is going to hold. Free throw or field goal percentage is still a concern for Jackson. Also, it's to be determined what his role is going to be once Vince Williams returns from injury. Jackson has been receiving spot starts, but let's see what happens with Memphis. I mean, their injury report varies on a day-to-day basis. I know for Friday's slate, most Bane and a few other guys are questionable, but Jackson has started 5 of the past 6 games. I think they will. I think they'll be interested in keeping him in the starting lineup for the rest of the season, just because it's hard to deny a guy on this team with their dearth of talent who's averaging 25 points per game. You got to let him roll.
Even if he comes off the bench, he'll be first guy off the bench and expected to gun as soon as he touches the ball. So he's going to score one way or the other. Tons of minutes available in Memphis, I think.
Super encouraging that a lot of this has come with Desmond Bane back on the court
right.
as well.
Good point. Yeah. Good point. All right, Kirien, you want to stay in Memphis and mention one of the other 2 healthy players for the Grizzlies.
Yeah. Before we get to my pick, I'll just say that GG is definitely capable of performing off the bench, but it's a very inconsistent production off the bench. As a starter, he's a lot better. Even if Vince Williams comes back, I feel like there's still a possibility Jaren Jackson goes to the sidelines eventually at some point. Yeah, okay. So I think there's a lot of moving parts there. Yeah. Also interrupting.
Those poor South Carolina Gamecock fans eliminated in the first round, and then they got to watch GG, who was only there for a year, light it up for Memphis. That's a shame.
So there was also some breaking news when Shannon was talking. The Pelicans released an official update on Brandon Ingram. They're calling MRI calls it a left knee bone contusion. He'll be reevaluated in 2 weeks. So That's almost essentially ruling him out for the rest of the fantasy season. But possibility coming back for the real postseason. Sorry about that, Ken. So, anyways, staying in Memphis, going back to Memphis, I suppose. We went to Memphis, and then we went back to New Orleans and back to Memphis. Someone can Google Maps that train ride for you. So I'm just going with Santi Aldama. Same reasons that Shannon said. There's a lot of moving parts in Memphis right now, and Aldama's taking advantage. He's been a regular on the injury report, so that's a little concerning. Sometimes questionable, sometimes probable. But he's been playing. He has only missed one of the last 10 games. Over his last 9 games, 15.6 boards, 3 assists, 1.3 blocks, and 1 steal. Very efficient, 47-40, 65 shooting splits. So that free throw percentage could be lacking. They only play 3 games next week, but there's a lot of opportunities, and I like Aldama's 3-point shooting for a big man.
I've always wanted Aldama to act like a young Rudy Gay, hitting threes, blocking shots on the Grizzlies. Not sure that'll ever happen, but anyway, in my little fantasy world. Okay, thank you, Kirien. And you're trying to sneak in the new guy, trying to do breaking the rules already. You got an extra regular pick.
Yeah, we'll go with Vasily Micic. I hope I didn't
that's right.
destroy that too bad. We've been highlighting him on waiver wire articles for RotoWire. I've heard his name mentioned on the podcast a bunch of times, so this isn't anything new. But he's still only rostered in 30% of Yahoo leagues, and that should be up way more. People were afraid of Trey Mann returning, might send him back to the bench or whatever, but that really hasn't impacted him at all. 16 points, 5 assists, 3 rebounds, and a steal, 53, 36, 88 shooting splits. Those are really good numbers for a guy that is available in 70% of leagues. Go pick him up as soon as you can and just let him roll. There was a little bit of an adjustment period of him not shooting NBA threes. Just from the eye test, watching him, it seemed like he was used to the EuroLeague 3, and every time he was going to shoot the NBA 3, he kind of paused for a little bit, but he's looking way smoother and super confident on the court. Go pick him up and reap the benefits.
All right, fantastic. Well said. We love Micic. We have discussed him a few times on the show. And I'm going to mention a repeat as well. Last year's cover guy, Jock Landale, reserve center for the Houston Rockets. Rockets have 4 games next week. Jock is coming off a 17-point, 12 rebound, 5 assists, and 2 blocks Thursday night in his win in the Rockets win over the Bulls. He had 7 blocks, 7 versus Washington on Tuesday. Oh, may your fantasy teams always play Washington. I'm not sure he'll get 7 again, but that's a good sign. He's not starting, but he is averaging almost 24 minutes a contest over the last 5 games. Landale is rostered in only 18% of Yahoo leagues. Go grab him for 4 nice games next week. And with that, Shannon, who is your second regular pick?
I'm going to highlight 2 players here as well. Peyton Pritchard, who we mentioned already, 22% rostered on Yahoo. He has been crushing it, receiving spot starts for the Celtics. Over the past week, he's played 3 games. On a per-game basis, he's been a top 40 player. In those 3 games, he is averaging 35 minutes, 18.7 points, 4 3-pointers, 4.3 rebounds, 7.7 assists while shooting 52% from the floor. And he has made every single free throw attempt over that stretch.
SPP, baby.
Lil PP is becoming a man right before our eyes. He's solid pickup. He's solid in daily leagues. Like I mentioned earlier, daily leagues, pick him up now for the Friday matchup. It's a great matchup against Detroit. Weekly leagues, it just depends on, he's only got 3 games next week. So there's some caution there, but if you need a point guard bad, he'll be an option. The other guy, I had to go 2 here because the other guy we've discussed multiple times, and he's also dealing with an injury of his own right now. Simone Fontecchio, Tech 19, Detroit Pistons, 38% rostered. Fontecchio, he's got a toe injury. He's already been ruled out for Friday's game, but he has been a stud since joining the Pistons. Averages per 36 averages of 18.4 points, 5.2 rebounds, 3.2 3-pointers, shooting 48% from the floor, 85% from the free throw line in 16 games since joining Detroit. Again, the toe injury already has him out for Friday. So it's more of a just keep an eye on him, or if you have a deep enough bench to stash an injured player, he would be a solid stash for next week. He is going to get an absurd amount of minutes as soon as he does return. Isaiah Stewart's out for the season. Asar Thompson's out for the season. Fontecchio is the guy that's going to see the biggest boost as soon as he is healthy.
Nice. All right, Kirien, who is your long shot?
So I have a funny story about Fontecchio before we move on real quick. In our stake league, I actually accidentally dropped him. It was right around the trade deadline, right? So I went on vacation around the trade deadline. I accidentally, I put him in as like a preliminary drop earlier in the week when I saw he was getting traded because the Pistons still had Bogdanovich. So I was like, he's going to be stuck behind him, nothing happening. And then I didn't obviously Bogdanovich got traded to the Knicks, so there was this huge opening for him. And I was like, oh, nice, it's going to happen. But I still had him as dropped. So then when waivers hit, I lost him. And I was like, well, we'll see what happens. And I've regretted that decision ever since. So don't be like me. Make sure you have him rostered. Anyways,
the European gunner spot was wide open for him to move.
Yeah, and all I need is threes in the stake league, so it's like the worst. I've regretted it. It's terrible.
You are far too young and have far too few responsibilities to make that kind of mistake. We call that the dad error with Fabs. Like essentially with me, no matter what day of the week for kids, waivers run on Sunday night. I'll set my pickups on Wednesday or Thursday when I have time. And then on Monday morning, when I open up my laptop, I see, oh no, I've picked up 4 injured players. Yeah. It happens.
Yeah, I was on vacation. It was my first vacation in a long time.
Kids really screw up your fantasy, Kirien.
Families just in general.
All right, give us your long shot, sir.
All right, so my long shot, we're going to Cleveland. George Niang, Evan Mobley, Max Strus, Dean Wade have all been out for extended time. They don't really have return timetables, so more opportunities for Niang coming. Donovan Mitchell has also been out. They said like a week after PRP injection. Those types of injections always make me hesitant because it's just kind of it's not to relieve, it's just to relieve the injury in the short term. So it doesn't mean just going to fix the issue at all. So he could still struggle. And there was a really concerning thing that Mitchell said before he got the injection. He's like, 9 out of 10 times I would jump and I would be fully explosive or whatever. But that 10th time I would just have nothing. And for a player like Mitchell, that is the key to his success. Obviously he's super talented, but whatever. So a lot of injuries. Niang has been.
And the good thing about George, he doesn't rely on athletic ability at all.
100%. But he can hit threes and he can get some boards. 52, 44, 100 shooting splits. So just like little PP, he doesn't miss his free throw line or his shots from the free throw line. He's sinking 2.8 threes per game, and he's got 4 games the next 2 weeks. So if you need threes, Niang is a great long shot opportunity. He's rostered in only 14% of Yahoo leagues right now.
The minivan's
that's BP.
The minivan is not always the most appealing ride, but you know what you're going to get, and it's somewhat comfortable.
Well put.
Exactly. Well said, both of you gentlemen. Thank you. My long shot, we're going to go to Washington. Guy had a nice revenge game last night. Center Rashawn Holmes. Washington has 4 games next week. Are you desperate for center help? Holmes can help. He's now started 5 games for the woeful Wizards. Last 2 games, 9 points, 12.5 rebounds, 1.5 stocks. It's basically your old school big stats. He will get you 0 threes. I would not want to see him run the 40. But if you're desperate for help at center, he's only rostered in 10% of leagues because generally he stinks. But now is the time of year when people who stink suddenly get an absurd amount of minutes. That's coming for Holmes on that terrible Washington team. If you need some field goal percentage and rebounding, he's your guy. Shannon, who is your long shot? I see you're sticking with him despite last night's game.
I stress long shot. If you're going to suggest a waiver wire pickup, you always go with the guy who just is coming off a Tony Snell-like game. Keon Ellis, guard for the Sacramento Kings. He is a defensive maestro. He's been just blocking shots left and right, swiping balls. 20% rostered on Yahoo. He's been top 70, a top 70 player on a per game basis over the past week. Now, here's the funny part with that top 70. He's only averaging 4.5 points per game, but he is seeing 2 steals and 1.8 blocks in the past 4 games. He's received spot starts in 4 of the past 6 contests for the Kings, and he's likely to stick in that starting 5. You got Kevin Huerter's out with no timetable, but it sounds like it'll probably be a lengthy absence for Huerter. I like what Keon Ellis brings to the Kings starting lineup. And, there'll be games where he only plays 15 or 20 minutes because they need Monk's offense coming off the bench. But Keon Ellis, especially in the defensive categories, can give you a nice little boost if you're looking for a streamer.
Another point that the game last night was the first loss for the Kings when Ellis started. I think they're like 7-1 now or 8-1 now when Ellis starts. So his production offensively may not lead to a lot of wins, but he's a key part to a winning formula in Sacramento for sure.
Nice. All right, gentlemen. Thank you for those waiver wire insights. It is now time to bring up your Friday DFS picks. It's an 8-game slate today. Friday, March 22nd. The highest over-under is Indiana at Golden State at 240. Nobody really that close. There was a 231 one out there. I'm going to answer questions online. But before we get to Kirien prodding Shannon for his picks, some main injuries. Ant Edwards and Gobert are both legit game-time decisions for the T-Wolves. Most of Boston's a game-time decision. And Tech 19, Nina Simone Fontecchio, is out for Shannon's Pistons tonight. Gentlemen, take it away.
All right, Shannon. So I'm looking at Memphis, San Antonio right now. Is there anybody in this game that needs to be rostered in DFS?
Absolutely. I mean, this is actually one of the most appealing games on my end. I love Gigi Jackson, who we mentioned earlier. He's 6,200 Kings. He's been an absolute stud. 4 straight games with 32 or more fantasy points, coming off a 48-point fantasy outing. One of your recommendations, Santi Claus, is crushing it on the DFS side as well. He's 6,400, very, very doable price range for him. And he's coming off one of his biggest games of the season, 52 plus fantasy points, 34, 35, the 2 games before that. Like we mentioned, there's going to be some players sitting, to be determined who is going to sit for Memphis. But I have to assume some of these guys they have listed as game time decisions. Vince Williams, he's doubtful. Bain and Williams, I would consider doubtful. At least one of those 2 is likely to sit. Conchar is questionable. So they're really going to rely on Gigi and Santi Aldama to pick up the slack. Those are the 2 guys absolutely love from the Memphis side. From the Spurs side, Trey Jones has been very solid of late. He's still a manageable salary on DraftKings. Right now, he is 5,800. Memphis is not great against opposing point guards, and Jones is crushing it. I mean, over the past 4, averaging over 36 fantasy points per game. And again, for sub $6,000 salary, that's tough to find. The other one, we mentioned Sohan every week. He's still a solid value. And of course, Wemby, it's hard to go against Wemby. If you're going for a higher price player, there's not many other guys who could pop off for 70 plus that are under 11,000. So I think Wemby's always in consideration when you're looking to fill a high price slot.
For sure. Great answers. You just look at 2 teams like that and you're like, there's got to be someone who's going to put up points and make a splash tonight. All right. So my next question is Jonas Valanciunas. He's got $27 salary on Yahoo, if I'm correct. And Bam Adebayo is questionable. So is that a guy that we're kind of looking at? Like if Bam plays, we're going to fade him. If Bam is out, we want to roll with him, or what do you think?
Yeah, and Valanciunas is even a more appealing salary on DraftKings. He's at 4,900. Miami is the top defense against opposing centers, so that's risky. But I do think there's an opportunity here for Valanciunas to see extra run with Ingram out. if he was priced any higher, I think it'd be too risky, but he's dropped under 5,000 for what is probably the first and only time this season. This feels like a game where he might pop off, even with Bam in there. The one concern, though, is he hasn't played. He's had 7 straight games with less than 20 minutes played.
Larry Nance is taking his time.
Yep.
Thanks. Nance isn't doing anything either.
It's Larry Nance. They're also just going smaller, and you have guys like Murphy playing off the bench and getting significant minutes. So it's a risky play, but at 4,900, I do think he's at least interesting and is someone who could be a low roster percentage that really pops off. We mentioned, I'm gonna jump to a different game. We mentioned Pritchard multiple times, Boston, Detroit. Pritchard's getting another spot start with Holiday out. Yeah, I really like Pritchard in this spot. Detroit's been one of the worst teams against opposing guards. We've highlighted that many times in the DFS segment this season, and Pritchard's only 5,100. I don't think there's a better bang for your buck value. He's basically a sure thing as long as the game's, I don't even know if the game has to be close. Even if they're up by 25, Pritchard's probably going to get his 30 to 35 minutes. And with that, he's going to be a lock for 30 plus fantasy points.
And that's exactly what Pritchard did on Monday against the Pistons. I think that was Monday. He had a pretty mediocre game, and then in the last 5 minutes, he hit a trio of threes, and all of a sudden, a mediocre game goes to a great game for a guy like Pritchard.
He creates his, he's one of the few guys actually on the bench that creates his own shot for the Celtics. So, and they love it. Frankly, the bench goes gaga when he starts doing the between the legs, fancy dribble and step backs.
So I got one more question. Are we're still rolling with DFS?
Let's do it.
All right. So the Clippers, you got injuries to Norman Powell and Terrence Mann on top of Russell Westbrook, right? Does that mean anything for Kawhi, PG, James Harden? And then are you afraid of playing any of those 3 superstars against a Portland team that the Clippers might be blown out by 40 in the third quarter?
Yeah, the blowout potential is definitely legit. It's also worrisome, 10 p.m. Eastern tip for that game. It's going to be hard for me to commit a roster spot, a lineup spot, and the necessary salary to one of those guys playing that late. With not a ton of options to swap out, let's say if one of them's ruled out last minute unexpectedly. You have the Indiana Golden State game as the same tip, and then Philly LA. They're all solid. Any of the 3 is solid. Paul George has been playing really well lately, so and he's a little bit cheaper than Kawhi, so he might be the guy I lean towards, but the blowout potential is legit. I will wrap this up with a couple other players really quick. Karis LeVert filling in for Donovan Mitchell has been an absolute stud. 43, 55, 45 fantasy points over his past 3.
Somebody's got to shoot for Cleveland. I mean,
exactly.
Healthy body.
And not just shoot, but he has 11 and 12 assists in the past 2 games too. He's been the primary distributor with Mitchell out and playing alongside Garland, which has been fun to watch for LeVert. He's only 7,400. And again, this is a guy who, if it's a close game, he should be, a good lock for 35, 40 fantasy points and upside for more. Kelly Oubre, another guy. We got shorthanded Philly team to be determined if Harris is going to play tonight. If Harris is out, and again, this is a late game, the latest game of the slate. But if Harris misses another game, I like Kelly Oubre, 6,500, 51 and 42 fantasy points in his past 2 outings, both games that Harris sat out. And that wraps it. The last point is the Detroit Pistons, as always.
Got to do
definitely it. Keep tabs on the starting lineup. I'm only comfortable running out any players who are in the starting lineup for Detroit tonight. Cade Cunningham will be a solid play, of course, but the small forward and power
with Evan Fournier, are you? Please,
if he starts,
stop this madness.
If he starts, I'll run it out. Me too, our boy. If he starts, I'll run him out. He's 3,700, so we'll see. I'm waiting on that starting lineup.
What is Fournier on DK tonight?
Fournier, let's see. He is one of the top values in our lineup optimizer.
He does shoot.
3,900.
Right.
So that he absolutely will be an option at that salary.
Terrible defense doesn't hurt you.
Maybe this doesn't apply for DFS tonight, but Cade Cunningham is wound up on the injury report a couple times over the last week with like injury maintenance type thing. If the Pistons shut him down, is Marcus Sasser a guy that you would want to turn to?
Yeah, absolutely. Ivy and Sasser. Sasser's the guy who has seen some increased run. I will say on the DFS side, Sasser has gotten enough. He's gotten enough ownership. He's been in enough lineups that his salary hasn't really dipped. He's 4,900 right now.
Oh wow!
So
yeah,
even with if he dips lower and gets back closer to 4,000 or under, he's much more interesting. He did play 34 minutes against Boston earlier this week, but Sasser's definitely a bigger part of the rotation already and will be down the stretch.
Kirien, this pod's already 40% Pistons. Don't encourage Shannon to go down that path more. Excellent insight, Shannon. As always, the DFS master here at RotoWire. Thank you very much, Shannon. Well done, Kirien. And I think now I have to awkwardly introduce my own Old Man Rant. Arg! The robots will kill us all. Last week, I was struggling to write an Old Man Rant, so my smarter, younger co-host, Alex Bertha, said, quote, "Let's use AI." He quickly asked ChatGPT, quote, "Please come up with a topical basketball-related rant that an old might yell from his front porch. I guess I am an old." Yes. Here is the artificial intelligence robot. Here's what that robot came up with. Arg! Back in my day, basketball was about grit, hustle, and teamwork. None of this flashy showboating and stat padding nonsense. These players today wouldn't last a second against the legends of yesteryear. And don't get me started on the officiating. It's like they're blind as bats out there. Charging fouls turn into blocks. Travels go unnoticed. Bah! Bring back the good old days of fundamental basketball where a pick and roll meant something and defense wasn't just a suggestion. Robotic arg. That's not bad. AI robot. I am going to get fired and replaced by a robot.
There's no way. That's not verbatim.
Yeah, that is verbatim.
Wow.
Alex cut and pasted it and sent it to me.
See you later, Ken.
Adios, amigos.
But can a robot wear Northwestern garb while saying that? I don't think so. I think that what's keep you.
Thank you, Kirien. We know huge Northwestern following here on the Friday pod. Cats play at 12:15 Eastern today against Florida Atlantic, by the way. Go Cats, go UNU. Okay. Mispronounced names. Do we have any mispronounced names this week?
Is it Me Too? I don't even know.
It is
Metu.
Metu.
Oh,
Metu. We call him Me Too.
We've been making the Me Too joke since you know how appropriate those are.
I think Kosan could probably be thrown in there. I don't know how to say.
Who's the small forward? Who's the small undrafted Princeton Ivy League forward for the Pistons we got asked about during the Ev Bwamwin?
Evuam.
Pretty sure I butchered that name. Yeah, both first and last name. And I don't know the correct one.
I haven't heard it 12,000 times yet, so I can't.
Exactly.
And we also had the Matas Busialis guy. I probably mispronounced it.
We're allowed to mispronounce college.
We'll have that nailed down by the draft.
Yeah,
by the draft. That's right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast presented by RotoWire. Give us a free try behind the subscription paywall at rotowire.com/try for all our free tools for fantasy, daily fantasy, and sports betting. Ken, take us out of here. Let's go to Houston, where things got chippy last night between the Bulls and Rockets. DeMar DeRozan and Dylan Brooks were both ejected. Brooks went after DeRozan gave young Jalen Green a hard foul that was ruled a flagrant 2. Brooks had this to say post-game. Nothing. He said nothing. Brooks did not speak to the media after the game. Really? After a regular season game, you said nothing, Brooks? Come on, that's ridiculous. Attention passengers, this 3-car fantasy train wreck has hit the end of the line. Thank you, Kirien. End stream.